Welcome. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Tamara Williams, and I'm the division level reading coach, grades 4 through 8. I'm from Tazewell County Public Schools.
And I'm Allison Mosca, fifth grade writing instructor at Tazewell Intermediate School.
I can tell you how thrilled we both are to be here today to talk to you about persuasive writing. I will be guiding you through the first section of this presentation, and Allison will be discussing the second section of the presentation with you. As you can see, we have a robust agenda planned for you, and let's get started. Our first section is research and background, so we're going to kick that off right now. This is what is needed for you to follow along easily throughout this webinar. And after the completion of the webinar, each of you will leave with a general understanding of persuasive writing and how this process can easily be implemented in your classroom. Each of you will also have access to the Google folder. That's going to include all the resources from today and a complete lesson plan that you can incorporate into your classroom. So let's look at the objectives for this webinar. I'd like to explain to you the reasons why we did what we did. By using authentic text sets from credible sources for bullet 1, that affords readers the opportunity to build their content knowledge. These text sets are actually articles that are collected from credible and reliable sources for the students. These are not textbooks. These are text sets that come from reliable and credible sources. We also want our attendees to see this process as an interactive process as we move through our reading and writing practices, which is the process of building, refining, and improving a project or product or an initiative through dialogic feedback. We also wanted to branch out from this 5-paragraph writing formula while seamlessly weaving in the 4 strands from our standards: communication and multimodal literacies, reading, writing, and research. And finally, we want to create an authentic local alternative assessment. So, what is the College Career and Community Writers Program? I would like to briefly discuss the foundation of our initiative. A link is provided on the upper elementary resources on the C3WP upper elementary site, and you can click on that. It's C3WP, and it'll take you right to the elementary resources. And this is where you will find explicit lessons, resources, and text sets. You will find them there, and it will walk you right through this process. So let's talk about what the College Career and Community Writers Program actually is. C3WP, as we call it, is a professional development opportunity for elementary, middle, and high school teachers that has a primary focus of supporting the instruction of evidence-based argument writing from nonfiction sources. So utilizing this wide spectrum of practices that includes routine argument writing, using text-based mini-use units, research arguments, and formative assessment practices, our students are able to develop those skills in source-based argument writing, which in turn leads to civic and community engagement. The National Writing Project, with the support of the United States Department of Education and Investment and Innovation grants, has engaged in this research. And yes, you can do this with elementary students. We have done this in other school divisions with first graders. So yes, this is a wonderful activity for students to participate in. Building 21st century skills is paramount to this initiative. Uh, the profile of the Virginia graduate establishes a set of expectations known as the 5 C's: critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, collaboration, and citizenship skills, while supporting the instruction of the 2017 English Standards of Learning. This approach helps prepare our students to meet this goal. Slides from a webinar from the English series are referenced for further reading. And you can see those right now, right there on our screen. It says Assessment Supports 2020-21. And I'd also like to add that some of the information used in this PowerPoint was gleaned from actual writing cycles that were completed during the 2018, 2019, and 2020-2021 school years. We actually learned when we did this as a practice in a 5th grade classroom 2 years ago, we actually learned better methods and better ways to present this second time to students. In order to assist you in following along in the webinar, the definitions of some of the key terms in this presentation are provided for you. I'm going to go ahead and briefly discuss these because we also want to internalize this vocabulary so we can use this vocabulary with our students when we're doing this type of writing. And in really some of this is in all of our writing. So let's look at number 1, recursive writing. That is writing that is broken into steps that feed by process and can be revisited: pre-writing, drafting, revising, and editing. Number 2, this process improves, you want to improve and shape your piece of writing over time in a continuous cycle that eventually becomes the final product or project. So to that end, you want to incorporate reading and discussion into the writing process. This allows students' ideas, new and old, to be revisited, and revised, new ideas to occur, and then those connections are made between all of these ideas. What's a claim? That is an opinion that is debatable and defensible. And then what's a counterclaim? Counter meaning opposite, which is made in opposition to a claim. And as I said, we want these terms to be fluid in our classroom. We want to use these terms with students so that they internalize and that they can use them in their language too. Credentials. That's what makes an expert believable, their credentials. And CRED, the root, means believe. And that's another little tidbit that we can add into our teaching and our vocabulary teaching in grade 5. Evidence helps prove your point and backs up your claim. And then your commentary, after you read your evidence or after you read your text and cite your evidence, you want to comment on that. So those are comments that discuss the evidence and how it relates to that claim. And then the text sets, of course, we just discussed those a moment ago. They are not textbooks. They are a collection of text, articles chosen intentionally for use in a mini unit. And you want to make sure that those text sets are credible, that they come from credible sources. Other key terms are our types of writing that have been pulled from our standards that we're discussing in this webinar. First, I'd like to discuss opinion writing. So let's look at that. This is in grades 3 and 4. And let's look at this carefully. Opinion writing, and this is coming from our standards. And as you will see throughout this webinar, we try to weave seamlessly our standards from all 4 areas and how they support each other as we spiral through our standards to grade 12. Opinion writing in grades 3 and 4, they're supported by reasons that have further explanations. Grade 3 and 4. And let's watch how this changes. Persuasive writing. It convinces your audience that your opinions have merit or valid. And look at this. That is grades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then we move into grades 11 and 12. Argumentative writing presents logical arguments to persuade the reader to agree with your viewpoint. That is grades 11 and 12. And at the bottom of this page, I have referenced the curriculum framework. And you can notice and see how each type of writing supports the next as we move to grade 12. And also I'd like to say that the key terms that we discussed in the previous slides, you will see these terms throughout our curriculum framework, both in reading and writing. As always, the standards are very important. Let's look closer at grades 3 through 5 in all four of our standards. And then the forms that are presented at each grade level with their expectations. So we're going to start with writing. Grades 3 and 4 are asked, as we just discussed, to create an opinion piece while stating a clear opinion, providing multiple facts using specific vocabulary in grade 3, and then in grade 4, it becomes specific reasons. Both ask for the writer to provide a conclusion. Grade 3 asks the writer to use organizational strategies to write, while grade 4 asks that students recognize different forms. Grade 5 writing shifts to where the writer must introduce a position. They must provide evidence and they must provide points for the opposite side. And then they argue against them. Grade 5 also asks the writer to elaborate the main idea. Grade 5 students also are asked to select specific information to guide the readers purposefully through the piece and then include those details to elaborate that main idea. As you can see, the complexity of this standard is increased at grade 5. Grades 3 and 4 provide the necessary framework or structure for grade 5 to fully embrace this standard. Research. Research is a vital component of this process. Grades 3 and 4 are asked to create a research project. Just as in the writing standard, the complexity of the standard increases at each grade level. One grade level leads to the next grade level as the standards spiral to grade 12. Grade 4 is charged with giving credit to the sources used in research. In grade 3, we evaluated the relevance of the information. Now we're looking at grade 5. Grade 4 evaluates the relevance and the reliability of the information, while grade 5 evaluates the reliability, the relevance, and the credibility of the information. And these are very important comparisons because, as you can see, each standard feeds to the next one. Communication and multimodal literacies. Multimodal presentations, written language, moving images, music, audio, presentation technologies, and movement. And the standard for grades 3, 4, and 5, the student will use effective communication skills in a variety of settings. So let's talk about this. The communication and multimodal literacies in grades 3 through 5 are paramount in creating a successful writing piece. Students view and create videos. They use presentation technologies to either write or create a persuasive piece or project. The standards ask that students participate in discussions and abide by rules of successful discourse while participating in collaborative discussions. They must work respectably with others in pairs, diverse groups, and in whole class settings. It is also requested that students use evidence to support their opinions and their conclusions in the communication and multimodal literacy strand. As you can see, the nonfiction standards are listed on our screen. The purpose of this exercise is to incorporate the standards into our instruction. This project is not about teaching comprehension skills, even though those skills are necessary for a successful implementation of our project. But we want to integrate those skills as we navigate this content of our text sets. We are building content instruction as we scaffold instruction throughout this cycle. Grade 4 reading, we can see that fact and opinion and distinguishing between the two is discussed in the grade 4 standards. And that is something else that is very important when we are looking at our text sets and deciding on our evidence and then forming opinions. And that is important in grade 4, just as in all the other nonfiction standards. And I would like to point out that summarizing is very, very important in this project. Being able to summarize your ideas, being able to summarize your details, being able to summarize and put information in notes, in your note-taking note catcher is very, very important. And we're going to move on to grade 5. Once again, we see how these standards spiral and build on the standards from grades 3 and 4. If you'll notice, we have to identify organizational patterns. We have transitional words that signal patterns. And these standards are introduced here. Students are asked to skim materials, and they also are asked to differentiate between fact and opinion. I would like to emphasize 5.6 because we also used this project that we did to emphasize our reading in 5.6. So you can see how important it is to integrate reading and writing. So let's go through this one. 5.6 is read and demonstrate comprehension of nonfiction text, and it is 5.6J, where we compare and contrast details and ideas within and between texts. So let's talk about this. Comparing and contrasting details and ideas within and between text while looking at these two accounts or perspectives of the same event or topic. This is what makes up the standard. The students must understand those ideas and topics and how they are presented differently by different authors. So I'll refer back to our text sets. We don't choose text sets that all support the same idea, philosophy, or opinion. The text sets are chosen to provide countering opinions and evidence. And that's 5.6J. This is a perfect opportunity while meeting the standards to introduce students to authentic text sets with varying viewpoints and then use those texts to create a persuasive writing piece. And as I said, I want to reiterate, our text sets are chosen to have opposing opinions, opposing evidence, and then students form their opinion and continue forward. So, how can writing help students be better readers? This research came from Dr. Timothy Shanahan, and you can find more about him on this, on Shanahan on Literacy, and this is on his blog, and it's entitled, How Can We Take Advantage of Reading-Writing Relationships? So let's talk about this. And this research reinforces some of the things that we're talking about today. Reading and writing draw upon the same body of language. They go hand in hand. With reading, students take in separate phonemes within words. They recognize the common spelling patterns. They link meaning to words and text. They understand grammar and how it in a way that allows them to comprehend. They recognize text structure, and then they use that accordingly. And they also will employ background knowledge while doing this. So what about writing? Does writing do the same thing? Let's see. Writing employs the same body of knowledge too. If students can't hear phonemes, they can't match sounds and letters, they can't remember their spelling patterns, they don't understand text structure, they don't have the grammar necessary to put together a written piece, and they have difficulty knowing how to use transitions. It's difficult for them to write the words on the page. So while teaching the foundations of reading, you're also teaching the foundations of writing. So let's look at this. The second one is reading and writing are both communication processes. So let's talk about it. Studies show that writers think about their audience and what they want to tell them, and then how to communicate that effectively to their audience, because they want you to understand their point, be it a narrative story. They want you to understand and feel with these are persuasive papers. They want you to see their side. So they want to communicate this effectively to their readers. Other studies indicate the value of having readers think about authors and the author's perspective. So let's flip that back to the reader. The reader is actually reading the writing of someone else, and they are interpreting and internalizing what that writer is trying to get across. So there is a communication. The reader is reading it, the writer is writing it, and that communication process goes back and forth. The third way is that reading and writing can connect through combined use. So how do we accomplish these goals? One is such as studying or learning from text and then composing synthesis papers. Okay, so goal one of this would be that you want to improve your comprehension and memory by doing this. So studies indicate that reading and then writing summaries or critique or to synthesize something of information has a powerful and positive impact on learning. So if we go back to our key terms, and Allison will talk more about this in her part of the presentation. Remember some of those key terms we were talking about with our evidence and looking at evidence and our recursive writing process. And those are all very important to writing our summaries and for students to internalize that information. So to recap that, I think what Dr. Shanahan is saying is that when you read and you take notes and you summarize and write that you're actually internalizing that information for future recall. Another goal of this is synthesis writing, where we teach students to collect information appropriately from text sources versus the report writing where we say write 3 paragraphs on a given topic. We're actually giving them the opportunity to collect this information. The second piece to this is we guide them through this process. We don't turn them loose. They don't know how to do this. So we guide them through the process to plan a paper with a particular purpose or structure. Then we also assist them in reading the text in ways that helps them write. And then we provide the guides that assist them in collecting and summarizing the information for comparative purposes, such as charting the ideas within a text that agree or disagree, a note catcher, annotating, highlighting, all the different ways that they can take this information and internalize it, and then complete a written paper. Now, I will turn the second section of our presentation over to Allison. Allison, along with our grade 5 teachers, completed this project, and she will guide you through her journey. Our school division has had in-person instruction since August of 2020. Students that did not attend in-person instruction participated in virtual learning. Our platform was Google Classroom in order to create an equitable learning situation for these students. We had instructional videos, we had Google Meets, we had Google Instruction, we had online tutoring. These were all utilized to provide an optimal learning experience for students. So I'm turning this over to Allison. Welcome, Allison.
Hello, I'm very excited to share this journey with you. The task that was presented to our students for the local assessment, it was at the end of March of 2021. The students had already participated in one writing cycle in November of 2020. We gave them an allotment of 3 weeks for this task. And they spent 2 of those weeks reading, researching, annotating, and taking notes before they completed a pre-writing and then their final drafts. The students were given 3 articles and 1 video on zoos. The assignment was whether or not you think zoos are an actual problem is really up to you. Are the animals thriving? Do they have enough space to meet their needs? Do zoos actually help endangered animals? Do zoos allow the general public to view animals that they might not ever get to see? Who benefits from zoos, the animals or the general public? Write a paper that supports your position using textual evidence from your resources. First, you'll want to generate interest. Asking questions and probing for prior knowledge is an excellent way to jumpstart this initiative. Using the standards of practice in the communication strand is very helpful when designing the discussion piece. As they participate and contribute in group discussions across content areas, students exchange ideas and opinions and change their minds or validate their original opinion. Our topic-specific questions are included on this slide. Have you ever been to a zoo? What do you know about zoos? What are 2 positive reasons for keeping animals in zoos? What are 2 negative reasons for keeping animals in zoos? Do you think animals should be kept in zoos? Our in-person discussion strategies were limited due to COVID restrictions. For my students, they seemed to care more about the topic the more they discussed it. Though writing might not have been their strongest subject, I know one girl specifically who wants to be a zoologist, so this topic really sparked her interest. After the initial discussions, the students then developed a claim or a position. It's not uncommon for students to change their claims or positions. Listed on the slide are sentences that can assist students in developing their claim. It might be fun to create a claim or a position wall in your classroom. I use these sentences to help students. I agree with blank because blank. I disagree with blank because blank. I can see that blank. However, I disagree with blank because blank. We began with simple discussion. I asked my students how they felt about zoos. They could answer more fluidly by responding verbally first, and then transitioning to writing. I believe some were indifferent on the topic at first, but once we began discussing the articles, they found themselves on one side or another. Part of this process is teaching students how to break down complex text in order to both comprehend and locate evidence. Once again, many of the partner strategies that could be utilized could not be used due to COVID restrictions. However, we have listed multiple reading strategies that could guide you. During the course of the reading process, the students participated in a teacher-led exercise. The purpose is to gradually release responsibility of reading to the students. All of the strands of the standards are important in this project, with each interdependent on the other for the success of the project. Reading and research could extend for at least 2 weeks. As a first read, we read the articles together to get the general idea. Coming upon the second read, we broke down the text through discussion and annotation. The third read was a little more independent, employing strategies for note-taking. Questioning is a very important part of the process. As students move through the articles, you can use various types of questions, such as open and closed questions, funnel questions, and probing questions. We've also included a question stems on this slide. For example, with which statement would the author of both the passages agree? Based on the article, the reader can conclude that, or both articles address the fact that. After much whole group discussion, I created an exercise using Google Forms and using these question stems to encourage better understanding. I assigned this as a comprehension strategy for these articles. And referring back to the reading, we employed the types of questions and question stems. As you move through the articles, you certainly want to continue discussing everything that's been read. Once again, employing those standards from the communication strand can guide students through meaningful discussions. Discussing 1, grand conversations. 2, build on others' ideas. 3, clearly state thoughts, opinions, and ideas. 4, use evidence to support opinions and conclusions. We utilize all 4 of these while encouraging students to use evidence to support their opinions and conclusions. Another reading and writing strategy we employed in this process was annotating. Students were allowed to annotate their articles and make notations in the margins. They were encouraged to highlight, color code, circle, or underline key vocabulary and important information. My classes were able to use the Kami extension to virtually highlight the materials in the articles that would either support or counter their claims. For equitability, my in-person learners also used Kami, and we did this during our second read. Note catchers were provided for students to use as a resource for collecting their information. Another idea is to use an evidence versus opinion T-chart. Both of those resources are located in the Google folder. My students chose at least 2 facts from each article that they read and accompanied them with at least 1 opinion. This would eventually help with the planning stage of their process. On the 3rd read, we used a jigsaw note catcher. This prompted students to use their articles to summarize information in a they say, I say format. And now we are ready for the writing process. The students were armed with notes, annotated articles, and the instructional rubric, and a graphic organizer. Students worked through this process to complete their first draft, receiving feedback, and while revising, editing, and finally publishing their final piece. When the students completed their final writing piece, they were allowed to use their organizers and notes to complete the final piece for the assessment. Our hope was to create a real-world situation that could further assist them in their writing endeavors as they move on to middle school and high school and ultimately college or career. Each step of this process built off of the one prior. The students worked very hard in those weeks, and I really believe it was represented in their final products. They were able to see how capable and prepared they were by building onto the material each week. And throughout the process, I provided feedback through their planning and their drafting of their pre-written papers. The persuasive paper checklist on this slide illustrates the pre-writing, drafting, and revising and editing process. This link takes you to the online English resources on the VDOE website. You will also find graphic organizers there. And next, Tammy will tell us all about the scoring of these pieces.
Welcome, and I'm glad to be back with you. Wasn't Allison's part of this? It's exciting to see students be able to do this. So you're actually going to get to see our student work too, and that's exciting. So let's get started on the understand scoring. To access understand scoring, we follow the link provided in one of 2 places on the Virginia Department of Education's website. And I have that link for you, and I have a red arrow for you. Right there it is, understand scoring. We train our teachers. This year was a little different, but we only had 1 or 2 new teachers doing this. In the past, we have a training session, either as a group. We've done it as a group, and we have done it individually using the understand scoring site. And actually the teachers go through this site and go through this and glean the information necessary as we move through a planned presentation with them, and then practice on their own. Our second one is the performance assessments and local alternative assessments. You can also access the scoring rubric here. Note that the first grade 5 writing rubric is an instructional rubric. This is used as a guide as the students move through the writing process. That is our first red arrow. Our second red arrow is the actual scoring rubric. And then once again, we have the understand scoring link that takes you to what we just talked about previously. So let's look at our students' writing. So when I selected, well, I didn't actually select these. I had teachers send these to me. These are from 4 different schools. These were scored twice. So, we actually asked for, when I actually asked for this, I asked for at the top of the 1, the top of the 2, the top of the 3, and the top of the 4. So this would be representative of a top 2, a top 3, a top 4. Okay, let's begin. So I'm going to read this to you, so we can discuss it. So let's start with the first one that scored as a 1. I like to go to zoo. My class was going to zoo. It's fun. You can eat there. The zoo gets a lot of animals there. You get to walk around. You get to look at the zoo animals like tigers, lions, sharks. You should not be scared of the animals. They are nice. The people there were so nice, they let you feed them sometimes, but we did not get to the animals here are nice and can watch them play, and they be mean to the other. You get to ride the camels sometimes, but when they're not out, it's not fun. It's time to leave. You walk past all the animals you had seen before. The students wanted something to eat, and they stopped to eat. The next bus stop, the school was so fun and boring at the same time. Then the bus driver takes us back to school. So first off, I think this writer more went towards a personal experience with the zoo. They did, it appears, to provide evidence. They incorporated their evidence into their story and made evidence into a story from the videos that were provided. And as we said, when the students created their final draft or in their final paper, they used everything they had collected, and then they constructed their own paper on their own. So let's look at this. It provided little or no unity, and the central idea was not elaborated. There was also not a focus on that central idea, and there was a lack of awareness of audience. Who was this student speaking to? Who was the audience? Organization was limited, and there was some disconnection from the central idea. Let's look at score point 2, and I will read this to you as well. And we want to look for things such as evidence. We want to start to look for those in these papers. Evidence, authorizing, transitions. These are some of the things that are in some of the points that are in our grade 5 standards. So let's look at this, and I will read it to you. Do zoos help animals? Zoos are the worst. They lock up poor animals in cages. Some zoos even have horrible environments. If a zoo shuts down, they have to put the animals back in the wild, and they can't survive because they don't know how. So think about it. Foremost, the poor animals get locked up in cages. From the article, animals rescued from an overcrowded zoo in Mexico. And so the student is now trying to authorize. They're given a source. The officials found an overcrowded and cramped cages piled on top of each other. It can cause depression, anxiety, and cause them to be mean. If they become mean, it would be unsafe for the visitors. Secondly, some zoos don't have the same resources as other zoos. From article, animals rescued from an overcrowded zoo in Mexico, some animals were kept in terrible and unsafe conditions and lacked proper care and had no proper ventilation. Last but not least, some zoos shut down. They have to let their animals free, and most of them die because they don't know how to survive. According to the article, Costa Rica closes its zoos and releases animals into the wild. It is not a simple task to let them go. Some zoos put them in another zoo, but not all zoos. Do you think zoos are good for animals? Zoos are so cruel. They lock up the poor animals in cages, and some zoos even have harsh environments. If a zoo shuts down, animals are sent back to the wild and they can't survive. No, do you think animals are getting taken care of? So let's look at this. Obviously, we can see the voice, and we can definitely see the opinion of our student writer. And this student writer is using some evidence. They are crediting that evidence back to a source. They also are leading off their paragraphs, and they also have a conclusion. So why did it get a score point of 2? The evidence was limited to the central idea, theme, or topic. It was the elaboration of that central idea. There was some repetition of mostly relevant details, and that the word choice was inconsistent and distracting. And as you can see, the writer had difficulty staying with the central topic throughout, and there was some repetition, and they attempted to authorize and use evidence, but it's a good try. Good for them. Score point 3. Let's look at this one, and I will read a couple of paragraphs from this. Do you really think zoos are beneficial for both animals and people? I know I don't. Zoos are horrible for both animals and people in numerous ways. Not every zoo is what it seems. All zoos don't have the same environment. Animals may get locked away in small areas and cages, and when reintroduced back into the wild, they may end up in critical condition. If you were an animal, would you want to be locked away in a small cage and then only be publicly viewed? Think about how repulsive that would be. Whilst the animals are being held captive over time, they can show signs of boredom or unusual behavior that can later even lead to major health issues. As the quote officials said, they had seized 101 of the 240 animals held at the zoo because of how overcrowded it was. From Kids News Spot Weebly.com claims zoos can and will close down and even eventually maybe even seize the animals. That seems crazy. Not every zoo is in some beautiful environment with amazing resources either. Now, even though not all, most zoos are in disgusting areas with all kinds of gunk and grime all around. If there were to be an animal in a terrible environment or not having proper resources to live, do you think you may, over time, start to become ill or sick? That obviously wouldn't be all fantastic for the animals, would it? Just think about poor little animals sick and suffering, all due to zoos. How horrible! It is scientifically proven that when animals are reintroduced back into the wild, they often tend to pass away or die. When in the zoo, they over time adjust to zoo life, and by taking them out would be like taking a baby from its home, making other people pay to view it, then eventually putting the baby on the side of the road with or without parents. Crazy, right? I know for sure I wouldn't be very pleased at all if that happened to me. How about you? How would you feel if you were taken from your home for several years at a time to just eventually be put in an unfamiliar location or place? And I think you see the writer's voice, and you also see some commentary here on some of the evidence that they have gleaned from their readings. In conclusion, do you think zoos are positive for not just people, but also the animals? I wouldn't. Animals have to suffer in ways no other should by being stuck in horrible environments, getting cramped in super small cages, and then eventually getting reintroduced back into the wild to become prey amongst other big and bad animals. Next time you want to go to a zoo, really think about the animals. Ask yourself, are they thriving? Are the workers meeting the animals' needs? Do zoos actually help endangered animals? And lastly, who actually benefits from this? And I think the conclusion for this student, they wrapped up this conclusion well to this paper. So score point of 3. In paragraph 2, the student, while trying to authorize and give credibility to what they were saying, there was some sentence issues there, which caused them to possibly uh, meander off a little bit, but they did maintain a consistent focus on their central idea. And there were they attempted to address their audience, and there was a clear purpose. They did elaborate the central idea by providing relevant descriptive details. And you could through those details, you could hear the voice of the writer. And this paper was organized in a logical manner with a very well-developed conclusion. Let's look at score point 4. Why zoos are good. I believe zoos are not a problem because they provide safe environment for animals to thrive in a controlled habitat. Zoos help scientists to save endangered animals from extinction through controlled breeding programs. Zoos allow people to see animals from around the world and to learn about them through programs and exhibits. I believe animals and the general public benefit from zoos. Very clearly stated their position. The position is very clearly stated. According to the video, of the 10 most stunning zoos, qualified zoos provide animals with a realistic habitat. For animals to thrive, they need space, animals of their kind, and food they would naturally eat. Qualified zoos specialize in research, education, and conservation. And when zoos focus on these 3 things, animals will thrive and live their best. Based on Article 3 and the video, and notice how this student in their paper compares an article and the video. They did not go ahead and authorize there, which would be something to work on in the future, to include the source or the author of Article 3, which would be probably would be good to include in their source list at the end of their paper. Qualified zoos help endangered animals by breeding programs. Breeding programs have helped the California condor. There used to be 22 living in the wild. Now there are over 300 living. Article 1 says many species only survive because of research, education, and breeding programs. Zoos allow people to see animals they would never see. Article 3 says most people are not able to travel around the world to see and learn about different kinds of zoos. Zoos allow us to see animals if they're natural, see them up close, and learn about them. Animals benefit through breeding programs, so they won't become extinct, and they also benefit through conservation. People benefit from education of the animals, learning how to keep them safe and inspire them to also help wild animals. In conclusion, I believe qualified zoos are a great resource for education conservation. So they're right there, they restate their position and research. If animals are thriving in their environments, their species are being protected. Both people and animals will benefit from zoos. Now that we have learned about the zoo, we should now go and find some animals. So as we can see, there's a clear, consistent focus on the theme. It is fully organized ideas, and it connects to the theme or topic. This paper fully develops and elaborates the central idea with highly relevant or descriptive details. I would consider this probably at the top of the 4, even though the expectation is to meet the rubric. The paper is not perfect, but the expectation is to meet the scoring rubric, which I think this writer did. We were very pleased with the results that we received from this initiative. The students were engaged. I felt that our writing was improved because they actually had content, and we went through a content-based process. We also went through the writing process. And when we did do this, the students were allowed, when we did sit for to create the final writing piece, the students did bring with them their notes. They brought their um, uh, persuasive writing, graphic organizer, and they brought their pre-writing. They did not bring the articles. There was a question about that from someone. The reason it was decided not to bring the articles is we wanted the students to use the information that they had put together themselves to construct a paper, much like we would as adults in a work situation, at a college, in a college situation, at a high school, at a middle school. We felt that this was a training ground to build the best practices for these students to construct a paper in the real world and how this would play out. So let's look at our website for resources for our text sets. You can go to the Library of Congress, National Geographic, ReadWorks, Library of Virginia, Encyclopedia of Virginia, the History Explorer, Common Lit, Read, Write, Think, C3WP, and the upper elementary piece to C3WP, and there's your link, and the Digital Library of Appalachia. And so before we move on, I just wanted to make sure that you were focused on where you could get your text sets to conduct this process. So I would like to recap how we did this. And so I'm going to list how we did this and then how this played out in the end. The first thing we did was the students were assigned a task, which was to write a persuasive paper about zoos. Then we generated interest. From there, we developed a claim of position. The next thing was we read the text sets, viewed the media pieces. While reading, we were questioning. While reading, we were discussing before, during, and even after we read it. While reading, we were doing annotations, highlighting, circling, underline. Some teachers use different colors, highlighters, colored pens, colored pencils. While reading, we employed note-taking strategies such as the note catcher, I say, they say. And then after this whole reading, discussion, research process, we employed our writing process, which was creating that graphic organizer, pre-writing, revising, editing, and then finally the students took their pre-writing, they took their note catcher, they say, I say, and they took their anything that they had annotated and wrote down, they took that with them too, and they constructed their final writing piece. And that is how we did this. And remember, these are the places that you can get the information for your text sets. We have additional references that will back up our presentation from today. And also the link for the persuasive resources on a Google Drive. You can find all of our resources that you can use to implement this in your room. And this is our contact information. Tamara T. Williams at twilliams@tcpsva.org and Allison Moscow at tcpsva.org. We are so happy to have presented this to you today. This is something that we found beneficial to our students, and we look forward to any of your emails, your comments, your questions. We will entertain them all. Allison, do you have anything you'd like to say before we close out?
I just want to thank you for reviewing our journey with us, and I hope our project can be used to help you implement the persuasive writing process in your classroom.
Thank you. And as I said before, feel free to email us at any time, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions.